welcome to our Warehouse Wednesday series. My name is Jordan Weber and I will be your moderator for today. Please note that this video is being recorded and all microphones have been muted, cameras have been turned off, and we encourage questions. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please put those in the chat or also the Q&A, and we'll be saving those for the end during our Q&A portion. But today we have for you an outline of how to avoid the top 10 OSHA infractions. And we're joined today by Celeste Hardy, the part of the OSHA Safety Education Specialist, the OSHA division here in North Carolina. And then Michael Thornton is our Regional Product Manager, who's going to be presenting some solutions following Celeste's presentation. And I will directly call out that Zoom did not want us to see Michael today for whatever reason. His camera will not turn on. So forgive him, but we'll just hear his majestic voice today. Welcome, Celeste. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
Well, I am going to be sharing the presentation, so bear with me while I click around, and you should be seeing it here. Now's a great time if you want to introduce yourself, Celeste, to the group. We have quite a crowd.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. I work with the OSH, which is OSHA in North Carolina. We are a state-run plan, and I'm one of our trainers in our Education, Training, and Technical Assistance Department. I've been with the department for 5 years. Prior to that, I spent about 25 years as a safety consultant doing all kinds of safety all over the place. But again, I started in North Carolina in the compliance department, and I was there for a little over a year, and then I moved into the training department. So I'm glad to talk to you today. And so what I wanted to do is, some of you may have remember, I did a talk last year when we first started talking about the NEP, the National Emphasis Program, for warehousing. And so what I've done is compile kind of a summary for you of the top 10 OSHA infractions or violations that we've seen, say, over the last 2.5 years since the NEP started. And just to let you know, we've had during that time frame, and so again, it's about probably 2 years, I would say maybe a little bit over 2 years. We actually had a total of 74 inspections in North Carolina. And out of those, 29 were what we would refer to as a national emphasis, or the special emphasis is how we refer to them in North Carolina. So these were the particular ones that were more into the warehousing, specifically assigned a visit because of the national emphasis program. And out of those inspections, these are the top fines that we're going to talk about. And our total dollar amount was $148,822. So next thing we'll talk about is so this is very interesting here because this one says Adidas America faces almost $400,000 in fines over warehouse safety violations. So based on how the violations work, it says in here that the facility was inspected in 21, and then safety hazards were identified, and then they were still not corrected in 2024. So what that tells me is you had repeat violations, or you had a violation that was deemed the company was negligent. They intentionally, or it was a willful violation. Willful violations start at about 154,000 each. So a willful violation is a violation where it could have been they already knew there was a problem, which is kind of what this is telling me here. They had identified hazards back in 2021 and they weren't corrected. So a follow-up visit is then going to look at it. You knew there was a problem. You did not take steps to correct it. At that point, they could be hit with what we call a willful serious violation. So that starts at like 154,000. Okay. So again, that's what that tells me. Once safety hazards are identified, you want to take all those steps to correct them. You don't want to leave them incomplete. Again, the money involved in that case over 400,000, and that could have just been over several different citations. So again, that's something. If you do have a OSHA inspection, whether it's a federal inspection or a state inspection, you really want to work at getting those items corrected. Send that information back into the compliance officer. Otherwise, you risk a repeat violation, which the repeats are double the fines also, and then the willful, which is much worse. So let's go to the next slide. The first in our list of top 10 violations was, yeah, let's go ahead and go, is the electrical. And this was a little surprising to me. But realize when an OSHA compliance inspector goes out to do an inspection, it's supposed to be comprehensive. So the National Emphasis Program said that they would be comprehensive inspections. So they look at everything wall to wall. So that's where these electrical ones are coming in. If you notice, look down the list in here. Something, unused openings are not closed. That could be in a little box. That could have been in the control panel. The work is not done in neat and workmanlike manner. So again, equipment not free from electrical hazards. These are the general electrical guidelines that really shouldn't be seen. You want these fixed. Live parts not guarded. Again, whenever you have a live electrical line or a box open, something damaged, someone could contact an electrical line, then you have a risk of electrocution. So we're talking serious violations. All of these, even though they sound kind of minor, they would be a serious violation because an electrical violation could mean someone could contact live electricity and be electrocuted. So again, even though some of these firmly secured to surface mounts, you think, oh, that sounds minor. But if it's loose and now the wiring becomes loose, you could have a problem. So again, I was a little surprised to see the number of violations that came in. We're making general electric violations the first one. And notice that was in 1910-303. So those are some of your basic electrical that really shouldn't be seen. All right. So let's move to the next one. Number 2 on the next one was the fire extinguishers. And again, remember, they're doing a comprehensive, so they're looking at everything. So these were ones where maybe the fire extinguisher wasn't mounted properly, there wasn't a sign, so someone couldn't find it, wasn't readily accessible. So if you're in a warehouse and you need to find a fire extinguisher, you should be able to either see a big sign on a post that says fire extinguisher here, painted red, some indication for a person to find it, and then readily accessible. They can get to it easily. And of course, they all have to have annual maintenance inspections. That's simple. So you've got to have a company come in and check them to make sure they're working, they're pressurized. And then you, as a company in a warehouse, should do a monthly check. Again, just make sure the charge is there, make sure the pin is in it, make sure it hasn't been used. I know when I did some of my inspections back in compliance, sometimes you would go in and you'd find a fire extinguisher had already been used and dispensed. But then some people didn't know that had happened. So you didn't have it replaced. Once it's been used the first time, you have to have a new one to replace it. So again, that's something that was an indication there's a problem somewhere if someone's using a fire extinguisher, not letting someone else know it's been used, we need to replace it. So then the next one that we had we've titled this one unsafe work practices. The violation is actually referred to as the general duty clause. So within the federal guidelines, and each state follows the same thing, if there is a hazard, a violation that doesn't have a specific standard for it, then it is cited under general duty. And that's what 1910 95.129 is. That's the general duty clause that says you, the employer, you're responsible for providing a safe working environment and conditions for your employees without the risk of severe injury or harm. So again, these are the ones that showed up. And all of these are potentially, one was actually an accident where we did have someone fall from a cherry picker and he fell 10 feet. Fortunately, he didn't die, which he could have if it had been much higher, but he did break his leg. So again, we had injuries, and if he had fallen and landed on his head, then he very well could have died. So all of these, if you look at these, are the potential for a severe accident. Someone operating a cherry picker not wearing a harness. Another one, a different violation, a different company. They had the harness on, but it's not attached. So that's not going to do any good. If it's not attached to the post, to the machine, it might as well not be on. And then we had incidents where multiple employees are riding on forklifts. Again, that's not acceptable either. That's dangerous. They're not carts that we're to, give people a ride through the warehouse. So again, that showed up on several different inspections, and that again is something that should never happen. We did have another one. Each of these were individual cases. Another employee fell due to not being tied off in an electric order picker over 7 feet high, 7 feet in height. Another one where the rack was not properly anchored. Now, and I know all of you that have warehouses, you know how important it is that your racks are anchored securely and they're protected, because a forklift that hits the corner of a racking system could then in turn cause the whole thing to go down. And you've probably all seen the videos or YouTubes, and I hope it hasn't happened in your warehouse, where someone has hit a rack. Doesn't have to be a corner, it can be right in the middle, hits a rack, and then boom, it's not secured and everything comes down. So now you've got a lot of damaged products and you've got the potential for injured people. So another one there near the bottom, the storage of materials created a hazard from falling boxes not secured. Again, how the material is stored in the racks. If they're not stored properly, and they can just fall on your employees while they're operating their equipment. And the last one there, seatbelts. Seatbelts are required. And that is going to, all of these items are going to be looked at when a OSHA compliance officer comes in. They are going to look to see, one, do you have seatbelts on your forklifts for those that are sit down? And then are your people using them? So again, all of these could have been, and I'm sure these were all serious violations based on the fines. The serious violation in North Carolina starts at, well, in federal OSHA 2, starts at 16,000. So we're talking 16,000 for a serious violation in any one of these cases. Okay, let's go to the next one. Hazard communication. Now, these were the different ones that showed up. We only found 2 cases where they had absolutely no written hazard communication program. You can get a copy of a program off any of the OSHA websites, download it, put your company name in, put your materials list in there, your SDS, and boom, you have a program. So there's really no excuse for people not to have a written hazard communication program. There are also no safety data sheets for chemicals that were used. Training wasn't provided. So all of these go hand in hand. And then secondary containers. So for example, look at these containers here. What's in them? We don't know. Some has blue product, some has kind of a yellow clear product. So the secondary container rule is that that container, if it's going to be unlabeled, it has to be kept in the control of one person that shift. It can't be left for the next person, and it can't be left out. That person now goes away and leaves, someone else comes to that area and they're working in it. That's going to be a violation. So in the long run, the best bet is label all your containers. Don't leave any of them unlabeled, because it's very hard to control that. And a lot of times we see fines because, again, one person's using it, oh, they're going home, the end of the shift. Next thing you know, it's been left. Boom. Now, what's in it? We just don't know. So let's go to the next slide. Number 5 in our list of violations was what we kind of thought we'd see more of, powered industrial trucks. But again, this is 1910-178. So these are the PIT, these are the specific ones for them. But the ones we saw here were wheel chocks, weren't being used. Again, these were loading docks that did not have a dock lock. So again, the forklift, as it's driving onto the trailer, there was nothing to prevent it from rolling. again, forklift training. I think we're going to see that all the time. They're going to look at the forklift training every time they go in there in detail. And I think Michael's going to talk more about this as we go along. But when you are doing your training, you have to have all of the formal instruction, practical training, practical exercises. You have to do all of that. It has to be documented. OSHA will be looking at it, and then they will be observing the operations of the forklifts to make sure that the people are using the procedures. Um, Another one we're seeing is that an evaluation must be done. The standard says you've got to go back and make sure you're reviewing that employee who is operating the forklift every 3 years, and you got to document it. So you've got to make sure that, yes, okay, he's using good procedures, you've observed him, and you've documented that. And then that last one is, again, a no-brainer. We should always have our operators do a daily inspection to make sure if something's not working right. And even if it is the seat belt, we've heard people, well, the seat belt wasn't working, then it needs to be fixed. Okay. So again, they need to do that inspection before daily inspection before each shift, before someone gets on the forklift to stop operating, to make sure it is working properly. All right, so let's go to the next one, number 6. And again, this is another electrical wiring and equipment. And this one was geared more to temporary or extension cords. We did see some outlet boxes that were junction boxes, covers missing, faceplates missing, and also some that were used inappropriately. They're not used for what they were designed. So again, sometimes someone may bring one out, cords are loose, cords are pulled, it's frayed. Flexible cords cannot be used as a permanent wiring. They're temporary. And so temporary doesn't mean, we can leave them there for 6 months and it's temporary. Temporary means we use them for the day and then we move them or we put them away. Any wiring that's going to be used on a consensus basis has to be in permanent conduit. We don't want to have that temporary wiring. So again, we've got to inspect our cords. We don't want anything frayed or pulled loose, and anything damaged should be removed from service. So again, remember, these inspections are comprehensive. So they're looking at everything when they walk by, and they're going to, if they find anything with the cords, they are going to, you're going to be cited for that. Anything electrical, remember, anything electrical will involve a citation. So let's go to the next one. I think we're at number 7 now. So this one is 1910-28. So this standard in itself is designed duty to have fall protection. This one is geared for those areas like this photo here. This photo has excellent fall protection. It's a raised mezzanine, a walkway where someone is going through. So if it's an area that's over 7 feet above, all right, actually 6 feet, you're required to have fall protection in your warehouse. So if you got people working, in fact, general industry is 4 feet is where you have to have protection. Any raised area here. So these were cases where these guidelines, these citations came on unguarded edges above 7 feet. So you had employees working, they were over 7 feet above for fall exposure with no type of guardrails or no protective devices. So again, you have to have some type of protection for the people. And then where you have open loading bays, we see this sometimes loading bays 4 feet is the maybe average height, but sometimes you see them much higher than that. Sometimes the bay there's a higher than 4 feet. So you do have a fall exposure. And one way to correct that is just close your doors or to put some type of gate in front of the bay when there's no trailer there. All right. So again, you're protecting that opening. So an employee who's walking in the warehouse or walking by doesn't have a potential fall exposure. So that could be used, just keeping the loading dock doors closed when there's not a trailer there, or putting a gate or some other barrier in front of it. But you are required to provide fall protection for the workers in that area. All right, so moving on to number 8. And this photo here we have is a fan, but our violation was automatic sprinkler systems. So automatic sprinkler systems, in order for them to work appropriately, we have to have a minimum clearance of 18 inches between the materials, the products being stored, and your sprinkler heads. If we don't have that minimum clearance, then once a sprinkler comes on, it will be blocked. So therefore, you're not going to get the water where it's needed to put out a fire. So again, this is one of those basic requirements that, I encourage everyone to go back and look, how high are we putting our materials in a warehouse, even in an office area adjacent to a warehouse, are we providing clearance for our sprinkler heads? But there were like 5 or 6 violations from this. And so the products were being stored too close to the top in most of those cases, to sprinkler heads. All right, so let's jump to number 9. 9 is exit route. So 1910-37 basically says you got to make sure that exit is kept clear and apparent. So that's important. Where is it? Again, in a very large warehouse, sometimes the exit path, the exit sign is blocked by the warehouse. So you need to make sure that that exit is clear. I did see a note just now. Someone wanted to know what number 8 was. We just went through 8, and that was the automatic sprinkler system, just for that person. Automatic sprinkler systems, there must be a minimum clearance of 18 inches between sprinkler heads and materials. You're welcome. No problem. All right, so let's go on back to the exit routes. Again, this is so important for evacuation procedures. If there is a fire, if there's an emergency, if there's a chemical spill, employees need to know where the exit is and how to get to it. So again, the exits have to be posted. Employees have to know where the route is. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. You can put signs on posts, but they must be kept free and unobstructed. All right, unobstructed. All right, let's go on to number 10 and our last for violations here. So this one was secure storage of materials. Again, this is 1910-176. So going through all these 10, we've had a variety of standards that we were cited on, not just forklifts and not just falls. But this one, storage of material, basically says that the storage of the material must not create a hazard. So again, has to be stored properly in the rack or on the hall. It can't create a fall or struck by hazard to the employees. Any racks damaged have to be repaired. So again, if the compliance officer is going by and they see racks that are bent or they've been damaged, now you're risking the rack could collapse. One more hit and boom, it could be gone. So again, cited there. And then all your racks have to be properly anchored and secured to the floor to prevent them from tipping over. So again, that's to maintain the stability of the racking system, making sure that you're not going to lose your materials. They're not going to fall over. So that's going to do it for me right now. And now I think we're going to move over to Michael.
Perfect. Thank you, Celeste.
You're welcome.
All right. So we're going to get into a little bit, and you'll hear some crossover from what Celeste said to our lift truck safety. First, I didn't introduce myself. So Michael Thornton, Regional Product Manager for North America and Latin America, or Product Manager, excuse me, Class 2 trucks. All right, so let's get going. So first off, lift truck safety is multifaceted. So what we say with that is it's site specific and it also requires a comprehensive approach. So we bring together these 3 boxes you see with safety culture, operator training, and operator assist solutions. So for the safety culture, that's a culture where safety is a shared responsibility. And operator training, that's a strong foundation of OSHA compliant operator training. And then we'll get into some technology-based solutions that we have that will help to enhance awareness. It's going to reinforce operator best practices while it's also addressing operational risks. So first, let's get into safety culture. What does that look like? There we go. So establishing a establishing a safety culture. Um, Basically, here we're talking about everything. I think Celeste just said that it's not just lift truck related as far as establishing that safety culture. So that's how we define culture, set of beliefs, and you can read through that. But basically, takeaway on that is we're developing an environment where every employee takes or thinks about safety every day, and it's their responsibility to ensure that themselves and others around them are safe. So that's our goal, is to establish that safe culture at the facility. So how do we do that? We'll go to the next one with the fostering accountability. So here we've got create a culture of collaboration and trust, not fear. So just best practices found over the year is good to start off with something that everybody can agree on. Obviously, like a safety item or feature that we all can agree on, just to get all that accountability involved, and allowing leadership to set the tone. So this isn't just something that comes down from corporate that we want to discuss. We want leadership involvement throughout the whole process to get more engagement on it, and then just the simple act of caring. And again, it's not all just about productivity. We want safe people. You want people to come and go and work in a safe environment. We want to avoid those ultimatums, do this or else, and those types of things. So that kind of crosses over where we get to some of that items we see that we don't want to see a whole bunch of, and that's the act of the safety police, or just thinking it's the wrong way to do it. We want to encourage ways to do it the right way. My biggest one on here that I don't like seeing is when we wait for an accident to actually take place before we address an issue. So we'll talk later in this presentation on some ways that we can basically foresee where incidents are occurring and ways to address that. So waiting for the accident is just a frustrating way to go. And then the last one being on here being the do the minimum, where you have a training meeting, you throw a few posters up, and have no real buy-in, and just sort of move on from that and check the box. Those are ways we see where it really hasn't fostered accountability. Now we'll get into understanding the psychology of it. So here you're going to have reluctance to approach coworkers. So how do you handle that new hire who comes in and sees something being done wrong? Have you created an environment where they would feel comfortable and listened to if they brought up a suggestion on maybe a different way to do it, or following the rules as opposed to how it's currently done? For that collaborative structure, again, that's bringing in leaders throughout the organization from all different levels. And then, of course, understanding what's the accountability of those behaviors. So these questions we put here at the bottom: are employees encouraged to bring up concerns? So thinking about that as you're implementing a safety culture. And then, can they stop work if they feel something is unsafe? Again, that takes someone to actually be able to stop what's going on and say, hey, we need to take our time and do something the right way as a safety issue. And then, as far as positive reinforcements for those safe behaviors, again, when you see somebody do something right, celebrate that, not just when things go wrong, and we want to point out those kind of concerns. So that's basically safety culture. And now we're going to touch on our as we said, a strong foundation of OSHA compliant operator training. So what does that look like? So we break it down, and again, so what's the purpose of training? And again, you could put all these into the same definition. First off, you want to provide a complete understanding of how to operate the lift truck. And you want to do that in a safe manner that's following the manufacturer guidelines and also those OSHA standards. So we wanted to be able to know how to use all the features on the truck, and then you want to be able to do that safely. And the goal being of those is to reduce accidents in the workplace. So those go through where we do our PIT, our pit operator training, which is powered industrial trucks. So basically how these trainings are set up, you've got a topic, so tailored to the truck. So we're going to talk about whatever truck is on site. You want to do it with their equipment on the site, and this is actually in the application specific to the workplace. So again, if the truck operates in this environment, that's where we want to, do the training on the truck. There'll be a formal instruction, which I know Celeste touched on this a little bit. So formal instructions like your classroom setting, where you're going to sit and you're going to go through some, PowerPoints and some notes and that type of information. And then we do a hands-on experience where you're going to get on the piece of equipment and actually operate the truck, learn how to, get on and off it properly, adjust all the settings, seats, forks, whatever you need to do. And then at the last part is being evaluated, and the key to this is being evaluated in that setting where you would actually do the work. So you have the evaluation. How that's done is by a trained instructor, and that instructor, per OSHA, is knowledgeable, trained, and experienced. You're going to have a trained instructor through the whole process. Now, we all know, again, most of us, it's hard for you to, sit and relax and just, sit in the classroom. It's the reason why a lot of us are in the roles we're in, is because that wasn't our perfect environment. So training doesn't have to be boring. We'll reference a few here. So the local lingo. So it's not a cookie cutter training program that you just, you could basically just go online and see something. This is more specific to the site and in reference to, specific, if there's a room at this facility, it's called something, we're going to refer to that. If there's a certain trucks and units that have names, we're going to make sure and include that. So it's not just, again, just some basic training. This is more specific to that actual site. Another way to keep it a little more engaging is the visual props. And a lot of times we will reference that we have, you remember 10% of what you read and hear as opposed to 65% of what you see. So if we can take this visual prop, we have one, say, for a stability triangle. Well, I can't show you what a truck's going to look like in an unsafe situation, on an actual truck. So by using a visual prop, I can show that, and everybody in the room has a chance to visually see that if the forks are a certain height, that I'm turning a certain direction, how that's going to come out of that. So again, you're talking, remember, 65% of it when they see that. So the more inclusion of visual props is always better. Part of the OSHA compliant training is a lift truck versus a car. And we see this as a nice way to basically establish a connection. Of course, depending on the model of the lift truck that they're working with, those similarities may not be as great, but often you have a counterbalanced truck sit down, they just visually, you see a seat and a steering wheel, and you can already take somebody who's maybe not spent a whole lot of time around lift trucks and connect them to the experience they're about to go through with the training. And there's times where you're going to be able to say, well, yes, in a car, I think as Celeste referenced, yeah, you have multiple people. In a fork truck, you're not going to have multiple people. There's one rider on the truck and that type of thing. So that's just a way, again, to establish a way to connect with the trainees. And then the last one being fundamentals. And again, it's always a core area to focus on the fundamentals. And that can be as simple as, the proper way to get on and off a truck, to make sure that that happens. And then to be looking the direction of travel, so you're comfortable, moving the truck through the facility. So just keeping a focus on those fundamentals can make it a lot more engaging for the participants. I think you got to cycle through a few of these here. There's different Dale. So we've got some pictures here, but that's okay. We've kind of gone through that. Now we'll move on from operator training. We're going to talk basically how we get into technology and how can that help what we're trying to accomplish. So for some best practices. So we've got a whole gamut of information or of options here. And this isn't a good, better, best. It's more of a what's right for your application on your site. It's just, so again, it's just whatever fits right and makes the most sense for a site. So here we've got, some of the lighting, which is just more of a passive one. So we've got blue LED spotlights, we've got the strobe light and the red zone light. So basically you have, here, I'm coming this way type thing with the blue LED spotlight. Strobe lights more of, here I am for those around me. So this is, again, awareness for those around the truck. And then you've got that red zone light, which basically works as a proximity light. Basically, stay out of my area. You don't want to get too close to this truck because I'm coming through. So again, those, lighting's nice, again, depending on the environment. And then not only is there the lighting for pedestrians, now we want to talk about the operator. If I'm in my compartment and I can't, see where I'm going, if there's poor lighting, then I'm going to have different challenges. So here we've got the rear work light, we've got dome lights. So I need lights in my compartment. And then you've got work lights and lamps just to light up the environment to make sure I can see any obstructions that would come into play and wouldn't want to run into anything. So now we'll run a little video here. So backup alarms. And again, these are nice just to let, everyone around you know that a truck is backing up somewhere near them. And you can see they've also incorporated some other lights on there. Then we get into some motion activated alarms. So if I have a reverse light where it's only when I'm going in reverse, or I could have a forward light. And again, it's just providing more awareness aids to create a safer environment. There's those lights moving around. So now you get into where we start talking telemetry, and this touches on some of the items again Celeste reference. We'll talk about the checklist in a second, but the first being locations. So I can track where my trucks, how they flow, and if there's certain areas where there's either heavy traffic or congestion, or if there's certain spots where a lot of incidents occur. And I can put I have the telemetry set up on this truck where I could track if there's a light incident, if it's just a hard bump that every truck hits that goes through there, I can track that and just know that at the end of the shift, I could track where that comes from. Or I can have depending on how I set the sensor on the impact, where it would disable the truck, and then I'd have to have a supervisor go over basically and unlock the truck. So it gives awareness to areas where you may have some challenges that we could address with some safety features. Another feature, which I touched on in Celeste, where you have a pre-inspection checklist, which is OSHA mandated. So you've got to have that. Well, a lot of folks do paper copies, so you can use telemetry to do a checklist, a digital checklist on the truck, and ask yes and no type questions. And some of those can be can make it so that the truck just says, okay, hey, we got a torn seat, so is the seat in great shape? And you could say no, and that's fine. We can take note of that. But then you can also have them where if I have a hydraulic cylinder leak or a seat belt not working, that I could disable the truck, basically making it so as I badge on that truck, it wouldn't wake up the truck. You've also got some other features on here that we talk about. 3 years of, after you're trained, you've got 3 years to renew your license or your certification. So I can have that in the system. So when that operator badge is on there and it's, whatever I said, if I want to say 2 months ahead of time, I could know that, get a flag that, hey, Tommy's going to be, he's 2 months from now, his certification's up. So I want to make sure and get him trained. Otherwise, if his certification expired and he goes to log into the truck, again, the truck's not going to wake up for him. So there's a lot of solutions there that can help more of a active way of working. So that's telemetry, and then we get into what's a newer technology. As you can see, that just launched on there. So this pedestrian awareness camera. So what's unique about this is this camera can identify the difference between a person standing somewhere and a pole or a box of apples or something on a pallet. So it identifies it based on the movement and the size and the number of inputs from people way smarter than me that put it in there to again identify it. And not only does it know what it is, and I can get an audible alert, a person, a computer speaking to you saying, there's a pedestrian within so many feet. It would, tell you as it goes. The second part of this is you have a visual, so you can see the little circle Iron Man looking circles around there. It will indicate where that person is located. So I've got the visual. So the audible, the voice is talking to me. visual. I can look and see it. And then what's unique about this is that you've got the traction alert. So even if I don't see this, maybe I'm looking at something or, in my own world, it's going to automatically and gradually slow down the lift truck. And you can set those parameters for control of the truck, but it's actually going to take control of it. So it's not just tracking something that happened. It can actually influence the truck and slow it down and reduce the likelihood of an incident occurring. So it's a new feature that we've got available. And then our Yale Reliant, which basically I like to say this one goes from tracking, incidents to tracking near misses. So this is a whole batch of technologies sort of tied into some different options. But what we see here is this is reinforcing all the practices that we would have learned in operator training. So it's going to shape the operator where an operator who's operating a truck in a safe manner may not even notice these features on the truck. But again, when you do notice them, it's there to help you, to be a training tool. So we can reduce, just as we saw with the last one, we can reduce the movement of the truck. So if I'm driving or backing right into an item, and we'll see here, they'll show the tugger going towards a box. So it's going to slow the truck down as it heads towards it. And as soon as he basically S's out of that, the truck's going to regain full function. So even though it may be next to it and our camera can see it, it's not going to slow down unless it's in the line of movement on the truck. So there's some features there. Then we've got you can see the scale one. So if you pick up something that's too heavy, takes into account if your mast is at certain heights, and it'll slow the movement of the truck. So it's basically having a safety person there who's able to influence and adjust the actual truck itself. We do have areas where I could say this is a break room or a bathroom area, and I don't really want trucks through here. If you got to go through here, I'm going to reduce you to a mile an hour or half a mile an hour and make it pretty painful you to go through there. You can reduce which trucks even go into certain areas. If you don't want your reach trucks, in an aisle, and it's only for an end rider or a different specific truck, you can set it up that way as well. So just again, a good solution that's providing, basically an onboard safety person. And we've all gotten used to that from our cars now that vibrate when you change a lane if you don't put your signal on that. And that's basically what we've incorporated here on these trucks. And it is a little different because these work environments are obviously different than, a highway or a road to that. But that's basically where we've gone with this. And you can see we've got 24.6. I'm sure that's changed several times on how many hours of real world runtime we've got on these. So that's Yale Reliant. And I think we're passing back to Celeste, I believe.
Okie dokie. So every state has a consultative department, which is separate from compliance. And consultative services are available. There's no charge for them. You've already paid for it. There's no risk of citation. So that's a great resource. In North Carolina, I think we have 16 right now across the state. With our new commissioner, I think we may be adding some more consultative consultants on the group. So the whole purpose being that it's for smaller employers, ideally 250, under 500 employees. Now, if you have more than that, you can still call. They'll answer questions for you, and they'll actually help you and work with you. But it is designed for smaller employers who, who need someone to just come out and look. You can ask them to come and look through your warehouse and say, hey, what if you were doing, say, a mock compliance inspection, what do we need to fix? And then they're going to give you a list. If you have anything, you fix it, and boom, you don't have to worry about any kind of citations. None of their paperwork goes to the compliance department. The only thing you have to agree for the consultative services that anything they recommend, you're going to fix it, which is why you ask them to come in the first place. So kind of a win-win for everyone. And then the last slide that we have here is just a list of numbers. And federal OSHA, again, OSHA.gov, you can go and you can look for consultative services in your state. Depending on if your state has a state-run plan or federal plan, every state has consultative services. And again, the service is available. You can call just to ask questions. You can ask them just to come look at part of your program or one certain area, a written program, your forklift driver training program, whatever you want, they'll look at it for you. And the whole goal is just to help you reduce your accidents, reduce the risks of potential injuries. So again, there's some links there with the laws, the North Carolina DOL, Department of Labor, that I'm a part of there. That's a number there that you can reach, and they'll put you through to consultative services. And then again, there's more references at the bottom. So that's going to do it for me, unless there are any questions we want to
There
take.
are a few questions. Yes. Thank you so much, Celeste. Thank you,
You're
Michael.
welcome.
We got some good feedback on your portion, Michael. It's nice to hear. I mean, it's always interesting to hear like what were some citations, right? But then people are kind of like, okay, that sounds really bad. How do I fix it? So thank you. Thanks for putting that in there, Michael. Celeste, you had a question from Zachary on the subject of the employee falling from 7 feet.
Mhm.
When it comes to the height of proper procedures for harness requirements, isn't this for general industry supposed to be a maximum of 48 inches elevation
Right,
without
4 feet.
without a harness being used?
Yeah, 4 feet. 48 inches, 4 feet. Yeah. So this was over 7 feet, was the case where they were cited. So yeah, general industry says basically at 4 feet or 48 inches, you do not have to provide fall protection. But once you go over that, you do.
Roger that. Okay. Um, let's see. We had a few. One more here. I'm so sorry. I'm like trying to go from the presentation here. We had one asking, what are the home centers and building material dealers included in the NEP for inspections?
Yes, they are. But we did not have any inspections at any of those. So these were not at any of those types of operations. Doesn't mean
Okay.
they are not included. They are included. But what North Carolina does, and some of the other states too, they will look at other areas where maybe they've had an accident or a complaint has come in, and they will target them first. And so if a Home Depot or the other big warehouse have had no incidents, then they'll be lower on the totem pole. So they won't be, high as priorities.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Then I know we had like the top number one incidents, but what is the most common injury you see? My favorite question.
I think we see, well, it depends. I mean, serious wise, we see a lot of foot injuries. And people hang their foot over the edge of the forklift when they're driving, or the stand up ones, they'll hang their feet on the edge and they'll go around a corner and they'll hit a rack or they'll hit something. And then we have a possible broken foot or a damaged, bruised foot. I would say that's probably the most. And then the next would be just slips and falls in the warehouse. And again, that goes kind of back to housekeeping. But yeah, those are kind of injuries that we see.
Always fascinating. We've had a lot of questions asking if this webinar is going to be recorded or can be sent. Yes, absolutely. There will be follow-up communication of how you can view and go back and reference the webinar at yale.com in our on-demand series. I'm also going to put in the chat here our next Wednesdays, the next Warehouse Wednesday. And you guys can register for that one as well. And that's discussing our automation also a great opportunity or to learn more about how safety is impacted in the warehouse when utilizing automation. But that would conclude our Warehouse Wednesday for today. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you, Celeste. Thank you, Michael, for your
You're welcome.
expertise. Always a joy to have you guys. And thank you everyone for joining today. We'll give you a few minutes back, but please join us next Wednesday, and we hope to see you again soon.